It was not long after midnight, and the car was already moving farther and farther away from the safety of home. 5 young girls sat inside, one of them secretly hidden beneath a blanket, as the car passed through the quiet roads of southern Indiana under a wide, indifferent night sky. Inside the vehicle, something was beginning to fracture. Strangely, most of the girls had only just met one another for the first time, but a plan, agreed upon by some, unknown to others, was already well in motion. They drove for miles in almost complete silence, conversation sparse, glances cautious, tension palpable, the atmosphere thick with unease and uncertainty, each mile creating more distance between them and the lives they had left behind only minutes earlier. Then, without warning, the night shifted. From beneath a blanket, in the back seat, a figure suddenly emerged. 16-year-old Melinda Loveless. Her presence no longer hidden, her intent no longer subtle, and, as the shock of that moment settled in, something else appeared as well. A knife, produced deliberately, and pressed to a 12-year-old passenger's throat. That throat was Shanda Sharer's. She had believed she was there to talk, to resolve a conflict that had already been allowed to grow too large, but she was wrong. As the blade lingered against Shanda's neck, another passenger spoke, her voice cutting through the terrifying silence to announce where they were going, but not what they were doing, to a place known locally as Witch's Castle. According to local legend, the old stone structure, which sat in a woodland on a hill, had once been a castle owned by 9 witches, a place of horror, whispered only in the dark. The story claimed the villagers eventually burned it to the ground in an effort to rid the area of evil, leaving behind only a small, isolated stone house. A place children dared one another to visit, a place spoken about in hushed tones. But this story tonight was no childhood game, and as the car continued down the empty highways, it became increasingly clear that the destination and what awaited there was never meant to be imaginary at all. What followed would not be a single moment, it would not be a sudden act, and it would not end quickly. Over the course of the night, a series of deliberate decisions were made, each one crossing a line that could simply not be uncrossed. A chain of events so prolonged, so calculated, and so deeply disturbing that it would leave investigators struggling to comprehend how it had been allowed to unfold at all. By morning, 4 of the girls would return home. Doors would open, lights would flick on, parents would hear footsteps in hallways and assume for a brief moment that everything was as it should be. But one girl did not come back. How did a conflict rooted in jealousy and teenage relationships evolve into hours of calculated violence, involving multiple locations and repeated opportunities to stop? When did the collective momentum of the group make turning back feel impossible, even though every step forward was a deliberate choice? What warning signs existed in the relationships, conversations, and behaviours leading up to the crime that hinted how dangerous the situation was becoming? And why was 12-year-old Shanda Sharer targeted with such sustained and personal brutality, becoming the focal point of so much anger and resentment?
Hello and welcome to I Could Murder a Podcast. We are back in the darkest series of all time, and I'm joined by the beautiful boys, the little lads, the little lads, but surprisingly old lads. Ben, How you doing?
We nearly made it through to a lovely warm introduction.
I'm just a young guy with like 2 old pals.
I'm just little, just
really
little.
annoyed me.
But thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's good to be back with another episode. This one, Tom, wow. It's made me go on lots of long walks in the countryside. It's very dark indeed. How are we, producer Dan?
Hello, boys. Hope you're both doing well. Nice and sunny outside, isn't it? I'm joking, Tom. To be honest with you, I've come to this one a bit blind. I mean, I know the headlines, of course. I know what's coming, but I'm excited to kind of delve into this story with you because this could be one that's up there in terms of the intense brutality and the group nature of it, which always fascinates me, kind of group brutality. But yes, I'm good. Hope you boys are good.
Yes, I'm all good, thank you, producer Dan. I agree. It's this one basically just to kind of little peek behind the curtain of how we kind of picked this series, and obviously it's the darkest series ever. Ben actually compiled a gigantic list of all these horrible dark cases, and it was a lot. There's a lot in there. Obviously, we went through them, picking them. And we all kind of had to pick which ones maybe stood out to us, or we tried to make them as different as possible, so it's not always going to the same issues, going over the same kind of crimes. We know some particular topics are very triggering as well, so we didn't want to do a whole series just based around that. We wanted to make sure that we kind of told a lot of different stories and a lot of different crimes, and I think we have achieved that. This story stood out to me as, for exactly what producer Dan just said. It's a group, it's a friendship group in some ways, and yeah, it is always terrifying. I mean, not that you can ever look past it, but when one person commits a crime, you can think, where was their head at that day, what happened? But when it's a group of people, and even people who weren't even directly involved really with the victim, so to speak, it's fascinating. And this case is truly heartbreaking, it's truly dark, and even the backgrounds on even some of the perpetrators themselves are very dark. So yeah, it's a very troubling case, but it's one that we wanted to share with you guys.
Yeah, yes, indeed. It's one case as well where there were, considering as well, there were so many perpetrators involved, the amount of chances they had to bring it to an end or stop what they were doing and, make the right decision, and repeatedly they avoid the opportunity to do that as a group. Really, really disturbing case, but one that's going to be important to share with you and important to tell. Yeah, this week is the case of the murder of Shanda Sharer, also referred to as Burned Alive by Her Friends, Shanda's story, and a teenage love triangle turned lethal. Yeah.
Tom touched on it. It fascinates me how actually powerful peer pressure can be, but the severe lack of intervention. This is what fascinates me about group stuff, is why didn't someone intervene more?
Yeah, this case reminded me of a recent episode we've done over on our website, a recent bonus episode, which was the murder of Skylar Neese, which is a kind of a modern, very similar case to this one. Lots of hauntingly similar outcomes and perpetrators involved. And yeah, if you want to watch that one and 250 others, more than 250 others, then head over to our website now. But yes, let's jump into this truly harrowing case.
So we're going to begin with some background to the case, first by exploring Shanda's home life and upbringing, before doing the same for the four perpetrators and exploring exactly how their paths came to cross in such a violent and disturbing manner, culminating in that awful, fateful night. So starting with the victim of the case, Shanda Renee Sharer, who was born on the 6th of June 1979 in Pineville, Kentucky, a small city set within the mountains of southeastern Kentucky, where daily life was shaped as much by its rural landscape as by its tight-knit, friendly community. Here, life moved at a slow, comfortable pace, the crime rate was one of the lowest in the state, and families tended to share a positive familiarity with one another. But unfortunately, Shanda would not remain here for long. Shanda was the eldest of two children born to Jacqueline and Stephen Sharer, having a younger sister called Paige, whom she was extremely close with and protective of. Their parents made the decision to divorce when their two children were still quite young, which resulted in Shanda and Paige being placed into their mother's custody and moved them 3 hours across the state to the city of Louisville, Kentucky. Here Shanda attended a local elementary and middle school where she was described as sweet, polite, sporty and trusting, someone who didn't like conflict and was genuinely a real people pleaser. Shanda formed a number of close friendships, she adored going to school dances and also joined the school cheerleading, softball and volleyball teams. But once again, before she was fully able to settle, she was relocated. In 1991, not long after Shanda's 12th birthday, her mother went through a second divorce and, once again, decided to uproot her girls in search of a fresh start. This time the move was only a few miles away to the city of New Albany, Indiana. Even a short distance carried its own challenges. Shanda had to enroll in a new school, Hazelwood Middle School, where she navigated unfamiliar hallways, tried to find a place of her own among classmates, and make new friends in a world that had already changed around her more than once. Her father, Stephen, remained only a sporadic presence in the family, someone she saw occasionally at the weekends, but who was not part of her everyday life. At home, Shanda was known as the responsible one, the older sister who often helped without being asked, who looked out for young Paige, who understood perhaps earlier than most that family meant showing up. She liked music, movies, and spending time with her friends. She followed the rules, she checked in, she tried to do what was expected of her, and she did that well. The natural instinct she had to care, to fit things, to be fair, to give people the benefit of the doubt, made her very popular and very well liked, but it also left her vulnerable in ways that, like any 12-year-old, she could not yet recognise.
At 12 years old, Shanda was still very much a child. By all accounts, she was a gentle, trusting child, someone who was shy at first but eager to connect. Friends and classmates later remembered her as soft-spoken and kind, someone who wanted to belong, who wanted to be liked, and who took conflicts to heart rather than brushing them aside. A big characteristic of Shanda's was that she was not confrontational in any way, shape or form. She hated it. She avoided trouble wherever she could, and she struggled, as many children do, with the emotional intensity of early adolescence. Friends remembered her as someone who always wanted to keep the peace, someone who believed that any problems could be talked through and any misunderstandings could easily be cleared up. She believed that any negative feelings could be smoothed over if you just tried hard enough. She believed in honesty, in kindness, and in doing the right thing. And on the night that she would eventually disappear, those very specific beliefs would place her directly in harm's way. Because she did not know that the conversation she thought she was walking into was already a trap. It was that trust, so ordinary and so human, that would ultimately cost her everything. So while Shanda's world was full of ordinary cares, elsewhere, just a few miles away in the very same city, someone was already learning how jealousy, obsession, and cruelty could be turned into action. A girl was growing up who would one day orchestrate a nightmare that no 12-year-old should ever face. Years before their paths would cross, Melinda Loveless was already on a trajectory that would bring darkness into the life of a girl she barely even knew. She was born 4 years before Shanda on the 28th of October 1975 in New Albany, the same streets that Shanda would later walk, and the same schools that she would one day attend, the same neighbourhoods that she would unknowingly share. Melinda was the youngest of 3 daughters born to Marjorie and Larry Loveless. So yeah, Tom mentioned at the start of the episode the particularly harrowing upbringings of some of the perpetrators. Do you think this case would have happened if Larry Loveless didn't exist?
Big no. I think Larry warped this child's mind. I mean, you can't take full responsibility away. I know a lot of people do grow up in family homes where things go on, abuse goes on, and horrible things do happen. And they go on to not commit any crime of any shape or form. So I'm not saying that take full responsibility away from them, but I do think it can affect people in different ways. And I think if you grew up in a family home where that wasn't happening, I think this case is a lot less likely to happen. Larry Loveless is a fucking scumbag.
Yeah, I think any child growing up under his roof would have a real struggle socially with the world. This is absolutely messed up what's about to happen now. So Larry would actually be described as one of the most negatively influential people in Melinda's life, which is, putting it very lightly. Not long before she was born, Larry had been drafted to the US Army during the Vietnam War. He experienced a significant amount of trauma whilst serving and worked his way up to the role of sergeant. He was treated as a hero when he returned to America, but the psychological and emotional scars of combat ran far beneath the surface. And there's stories online that he didn't actually see combat during this time, but returned a very different person. And the effects of war would cause wounds that would ripple through the family home he would try to build. After the war, Larry would take on a number of different employment opportunities whilst also collecting a small military pension. He first worked as a mail carrier for Southern Railways before that came to an end for quote-unquote unknown reasons. And apparently the unknown reasons are that he took the mail home with him and set it on fire in his garden instead of delivering it.
Oh. Which is not helpful.
It's not helpful. Dr. Grande on YouTube had a field day with that bit, comparing it to the the effectiveness of modern postage services.
Oh, God.
He did about 4 bits on it.
Yeah.
By today's standards, he was a star employee. Doesn't sound like that, but yeah.
I mean, I've never had that. Maybe in America it's worse. Over here, I don't really have many complaints, really.
This could be a huge assumption, but you get a lot more porch pirates in America than the UK. Is that an American thing, porch pirates?
I can imagine, actually, yeah. It's quite good around here. My Amazon packages can sit on the front porch for days before I've realised without being stolen.
Dan said a thing to me, which I'm not trying to highlight this as a possibility, but I didn't know how easy it is to people to get around ring doorbells and stuff like that. Yeah, which I'd never.
Really?
Yeah, they're not as fail safe as I thought they were. So that's something for another day.
Can they be operated remotely? Is that what you're kind of...
Well, you can look at it remotely yourself, but some people, if they want to get around it, can
interfere with it remotely.
They can pretty much just switch them off with the flip of a switch and then activate your car without a key. So, and take it, obviously. Electronics.
Scary times.
It's not safe.
Yeah. Well, back to Larry. Yeah, removed from his mail carrier role because he was burning the mail in his garden.
Larry Postless.
Yes, Larry Postless. He then started working as a probation officer for the New Albany Police Department, but he was fired not long after completing his mandatory training when he and his partner violently assaulted an African-American male in public, claiming that the man had slept with his wife, Melinda's mother, Marjorie. And there'll be more on Marjorie shortly. He also briefly became a marriage counsellor for Graceland Baptist Church. And you can kind of guess where this might be going. He was unfortunately asked to step down after he was reported as being, quote, too forward and too flirty with dozens of female clients, even once attempting to rape one of them. Larry was also described by his daughters as someone who was, quote, deeply controlling, aggressive, and unpredictable. Whilst Marjorie herself would even later describe her husband as a total sexual deviant who would wear her and her young daughter's underwear and makeup. A man who was incapable of staying faithful, and a man who held a bizarre mixture of incredible jealousy and fascination with seeing her have sex with other men and also women. So a highly problematic and turbulent household there, to say the least, for young Melinda, and it's only going to get worse.
So yeah, just that note on why he would beat up an inmate for having sex with his wife. That was one of his favourite things to watch people have sex with his wife. She apparently didn't want anything to do with it, but he'd be very forceful about it and encouraged friends, co-workers to basically sleep with his wife. Yeah, horrible.
It's very Fred West vibes. Old Larry Loveless, and I do not like it.
I don't like the fact his name sounds like a Roald Dahl character. So it sounds quite like a figure of fun. But then it's really not fun for anyone.
So Marjorie would also describe Larry as controlling, dangerous, and highly abusive, not only towards her, but disturbingly towards their young daughters. A man whose presence and actions left deep, lasting psychological scars on their children. So although Marjorie had worked on and off since 1974 and the family outwardly appeared prosperous in the upper middle class suburb of Floyd's Knobs, Indiana, the Loveless household was far from secure. So yeah, another odd dynamic here is that Larry rarely shared any of his income with the family, instead opting to spend his money impulsively on firearms, motorcycles, and cars, eventually filing for bankruptcy in 1980. Extended family members later described their marriage as emotionally cold and ironically as loveless. So the Loveless family were literally in a loveless marriage. And they also recalled the daughters regularly arriving at relatives' homes hungry. These were small but telling signs of a childhood lived amid neglect and unpredictability. The lessons that she absorbed and witnessed firsthand from her father about control, jealousy, and the consequences of power were lessons that would echo far beyond her childhood, eventually intersecting with the lives of others in ways that no one could have anticipated. It has also been noted that Melinda had spoken about murder, violence, and notoriety long before she met Shanda. Not in panic or distress, but with a disturbing sense of curiosity and intent. So yeah, there are basically... Melinda would go to school and occasionally talk about things that she had heard or seen in the news, and she would have a real fascination with true crime and murder, and she would apparently say to some friends on some occasions, ask questions along the lines of what would it feel like to kill someone or end someone's life, and she would regularly talk about this, but not like to try and unsettle someone. She would more do it as genuinely intrigued about the possibility.
The terrible childhood and family experiences did not end there for those living under the Loveless roof. And just a bit of a trigger warning here, this next paragraph or so does get quite graphic and disturbing. Larry Loveless was indeed a violent deviant with potentially multiple untreated mental health conditions. He was very prone to unpredictable outbursts, intimidation, and a controlling, manipulative presence that kept his family constantly on edge. This was partly a result of both parents regularly consuming huge amounts of alcohol together. Against her will, Larry would often take Marjorie to local bars as well as bars out of state, where he would introduce himself as a doctor or a dentist when making conversation with strangers. Eventually, after getting to know the individual, he would offer Marjorie, who'd introduced as his girlfriend, to the individual or groups of individuals for sex, but only if he could watch.
Just like Gareth Keenan and the motorbike.
Oh, life. Oh, life. He would do the same for some of his many work colleagues, and he would also start to throw numerous orgies and swinger meetups at his house, once again watching Marjorie with others. He did all of this whilst his 3 young daughters were present in the house. Eventually, it got to the point that Marjorie could no longer bear it, and she attempted to end her life numerous times in front of her husband and children. In one instance, by trying to drown herself in the family bathtub in front of the children. Disturbingly, Marjorie was punished for this by Larry. He arranged to have her gang raped by several of his friends. It is alleged that Marjorie refused to have sex with him for a month after this, so Larry responded by allegedly raping her in front of their children, or whilst they were listening through an open door. For reasons that are unknown, in 1981, when Melinda was 5 years old, Larry and Marjorie became immersed with their local Baptist church. Here, they arranged for a 50-year-old man they had just met to take their child to a locked motel room for 5 hours, during which time he repeatedly conducted an exorcism on the young child. Melinda was never the same after this point. In 1986, when Melinda was just 10 years old, her parents went out to a local bar one night, but only her father returned home. In doing so, Larry informed the children that their mother had had an accident and was in hospital. The reality was that Marjorie said no to him bringing 2 random women home with them, so he beat her within an inch of her life, forcing her to be rushed to hospital for urgent medical attention. He was later charged with battery for the incident. Despite attempts to maintain outward appearances, the home was completely unsafe and unstable. Marjorie tried to protect her children while navigating her own significant trauma, sometimes seeking help or interventions, but the daughters were constantly aware that the boundaries of safe and normalcy could vanish in an instant. The abuse did not end with Marjorie.
Yeah, just going back to Ben's question earlier about saying without Larry in Melinda's life, would she have gone on to do the things she did? As I said, some people go through these things and they're able to kind of avoid, treading down a path of crime, but you can also understand how these things would deeply affect someone, the way they view the world, the way they view sex, the way they view, people they could trust. It's not surprising that someone would have, darker times in their life and go on to commit heinous things themselves after suffering this at such a young age.
Well, this is it. We don't know too much about Melinda's sisters and what they went on to do, but this instance here where both parents have willingly given away their 5-year-old daughter to a random 50-year-old man to conduct a quote-unquote exorcism in a locked motel room. I mean, these are the 2 people you trust most in your life doing that to you, as well as everything else that's going on in the household, on a daily basis. I don't think any child would really have a chance under Larry Loveless's roof.
It is reported that Larry was violently and sexually abusive to his younger daughters, as well as one of their female cousins, Teddy, who was just 10 years old when the abuse started. Teddy would claim that she saw Larry bind and rape all 3 of his daughters in succession in the family garage, but all 3 sisters would later deny this. Larry was also alleged to have molested all 3 daughters on a regular basis, and also forced them to sleep in the same bed as him for most of their childhood. He is reported as frequently finding and smelling his daughter's underwear in front of them and their friends in a bizarre attempt to embarrass them. This would happen so often that the children would begin to hide their underwear from their own father. And finally, he once fired a handgun towards his eldest daughter, Michelle, and intentionally narrowly missed her when she was just 7 years old. The tension in the Loveless household finally erupted in November of 1990, not long after Melinda had turned 15 years old, after Larry was caught spying on Melinda and a friend, who Larry had allegedly encouraged to be heavily intimate with one another. In discovering this, Marjorie confronted him with a kitchen knife, a desperate act of defiance that ended with Larry being hospitalised after he tried to snatch the weapon from her. The violence of that night pushed Marjorie to the brink, and she attempted to end her life once more, leaving her daughters to call for help and involve the authorities. In the aftermath, Larry filed for divorce and abandoned his family, quickly moving across the country to Avon Park, Florida. For Melinda, the departure of her father was a complicated blow. Relief and grief tangled together, compounded by the sting of watching her parents later marry new partners. He maintained brief contact through letters, but eventually all communication ceased. Larry Loveless would later die in a car crash during the Christmas period of 1998.
Good
riddance. Yeah.
Absolute monster. Absolute monster. Yeah, that for me is one of the most disturbing childhoods, upbringings, backgrounds that we've ever covered on the podcast. What an absolute devil that man was.
Mm.
Even within this existing darkness, other figures were already emerging. Other young girls whose own histories, attitudes and personalities would feed the tension, jealousy and cruelty that had already begun to take shape. Among them was Mary Lorraine Tackett. Feels like an Irish limerick. Mary Lorraine Tackett, she had a horse, how you to back it?
She made a great racket.
Dan likes tennis.
Yeah.
Among them was Mary Lorraine Tackett, who is known as Laurie, a girl whose presence would introduce a different, unpredictable and volatile dynamic to the mix. While Melinda's life experiences had hardened her to fear and control, Laurie's upbringing and temperament added yet another layer of intensity. Laurie Tackett was born on the 5th of October 1974, an hour north of New Albany in the city of Madison, Indiana. She was born into a strict religious working-class family who were incredibly controlling of their daughter. Like Melinda, her relationship with her father was allegedly abusive and highly disturbing. Her father had a lengthy criminal record of crimes of violence and is alleged to have been abusive to his daughter on at least 2 occasions between the ages of 5 and 12. Laurie's mother, meanwhile, was incredibly religious and, perhaps as a result, was incredibly strict with her young daughter. She once almost strangled Laurie to death for seeing her wearing a pair of jeans at school, having changed out of a long dress she had been sent to school wearing. As Laurie entered her mid-teens, her life was increasingly influenced by moments of rebellion, a growing fascination with the occult, and repeated conflicts at home, especially with her controlling and abusive mother. Social workers became involved with the family, and her parents reluctantly agreed to unannounced visits to ensure her safety, but tensions with her mother would not go away. On one occasion, her mother stormed to the home of a friend, who we will be discussing shortly, after learning that this particular friend had been given a Ouija board by her father. After screaming at the parents of this friend, Laurie's mother demanded that the Ouija board be burned and, boldly, that the house now needed to be exorcised. A lot of exorcisms already in this been mentioned. I think we've already mentioned this before, but none of you guys have ever mucked around with a Ouija board, have you?
No, I'd love to muck around with one.
I would also love to muck around with one, to be fair.
Damn, can I watch?
I mean, are we asking for trouble in saying that?
Well, I mean, that'd be an interesting thing to film, Ouija board. It is spooky.
Can you do it any time, or do you have to do it like midnight?
It feels like
a Candyman.
I feel like it has to be an evening. It has to be when it's dark, at least.
Maybe in the woods.
No.
Or actually, I'm not sure about that.
Not in the woods. No.
You don't know who's out there.
That's true.
It'd be good to do it somewhere where there's a bit of a history and there's alleged lurkins.
Oof.
Yeah.
By the age of 15, Laurie was experimenting with her sexuality and also with self-harm, influenced in part by a girlfriend who shared her interest in the occult. We'll also be discussing this girlfriend shortly. The young couple began dramatizing possession, claiming to channel the spirit of Deanna the vampire, a character that Laurie would play in order to impress friends. And in March of 1991, after cutting her wrists deeply alongside her girlfriend and another friend, she was hospitalized, diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, and reported to clinicians that she had been experiencing hallucinations since childhood. Despite treatment and release, she dropped out of high school later that year, moving between homes in Louisville and Madison, drifting from friend to friend, and in late November of 1991, forming a close and fateful friendship with Melinda Loveless. By December, Laurie's life had become heavily entwined with Melinda's, spending most of her time in New Albany and Louisville with her, setting the stage for a volatile partnership that would eventually pull an unsuspecting 12-year-old girl into a nightmare. But there's still two more individuals to add to the group, the friend and the girlfriend.
So yeah, this is the we've done two of the perpetrators already, and that's Melinda and Laurie. They knew each other, but the other two girls we're about to discuss had never met Melinda. It all gets a bit complicated on the night of, but Laurie knew the two girls we're about to discuss, and all of these individuals had very troubled upbringings in slightly different ways, but abusive parents was a common theme, and they seem to that mix of, we've talked about it before, kind of with duos, I guess, the mixture of two personalities and how that brings out the worst in one, or the other one is the dominant one and the other one's a follower. As we all kind of said at the start, the dynamic of four perpetrators being involved, all with different beliefs and abilities and choices, their own ability to make choices, makes this really, really odd, but also all the more troubling to try and understand this case, because this mixture of personalities is essentially what gave the platform for this to happen. So we'll start with the friend connected to the infamous Ouija board, and that is Hope Rippey.
All these names are fucking made up.
Hope Anna Rippey was born on the 9th of June 1976, also in the city of Madison, Indiana. Her father worked as an engineer at a local power plant, and all initially appeared to be well in her family. However, when her parents divorced in February of 1984, Hope moved with her mother and her siblings 350 miles away to the small village of Quincy, Michigan. Tom is smiling. Quincy Wiggum.
Quincy. Well, the dad works in a power plant.
Yeah, it all connects. And Hope would spend the following 3 years in this small village. Life there was far from smooth. The household was often turbulent, and the young girl struggled to find a sense of stability amid the many different shifting dynamics. In 1987, her parents suddenly reunited, and the family returned to Madison, where Hope was reunited with her childhood friend, Laurie Tackett. Her parents, however, viewed Laurie as a very negative influence, wary of the dark energy and chaos that she apparently brought with her. Like so many of the girls in this story, Hope began to experiment with self-harm around the age of 15. Finally, completing the group of 4 girls was Laurie's girlfriend, Toni Lawrence. In some of the documentaries I've watched, Toni is kind of painted as the one with allegedly least involvement in the horror that would follow, but also one of the ones who, if she was perhaps slightly more trusting of police, and she had a reason to distrust the police, she may have been the one individual that could have prevented this case from, going as far as it did.
From the research I've done, I gathered that she was the least involved. I think you can put the responsibility on all the girls in terms of stopping it from happening. It's tricky if you're one of 4 and it's all unfolding, obviously we'll get into it, unfolding in front of you. Especially when there's such violence taking place. She's definitely been painted as the least. And she does take some form of action later on as well. But it's a tricky one to unpick.
Yeah.
Also, it's Clancy Wiggum, not Quincy Wiggum.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Clancy, yeah. Oh, Quincy. Who's Quincy then? Is it just no
Quincy
one?
Jones.
Quincy Jones, of course. So like many of the others, Toni had experienced a highly turbulent and abusive childhood. She claimed that she was sexually abused by an older male relative at the age of 9, and together with her parents, she would go to the police when an older teenage boy raped her when she was just 14 years old. Shockingly, the police's only intervention was issuing an order for the boy to stay away from Tony. So this is why now Tony just feels like if you go to the police, they're not going to do anything. And this would supposedly play a part in her not wanting to go to the police later down the line, which you can kind of understand that. At the same time, Tony did play a part in what would happen to Shanda. That's not, deflecting from that. From here, Tony would regularly attend counselling sessions, but often struggled with her own changing mental health struggles. From this moment onwards, she had a very low self-esteem, and she began to experiment, like many of the rest of the group, with self-harm. According to family members, she became promiscuous around this time, and would often stay out of the family house for dozens of hours at a time. She became incredibly close with Hope Rippey and entered a relationship with Laurie Tackett, but she would not meet Shanda Sharer or Melinda Loveless if it were not for a particular series of events. Together, the 5 girls, 12-year-old Shanda Sharer, 16-year-old Melinda Loveless, 17-year-old Laurie Tackett, 15-year-old Hope Rippey, and 15-year-old Tony Lawrence were beginning to intersect in ways that would eventually converge on one fateful night that would change everything, a convergence that would forever mark the life of one innocent 12-year-old girl. So we now have our 4 perpetrators, and we also unfortunately have our victim. What seemed to ignite the trouble that would follow is a particular love interest. So this is essentially how many of the group came to know each other, or at least some of them, and between the group would decide that Shanda Sharer would become the focus of their anger. So the story doesn't begin with the car or the knife or the dark roads of Indiana. It begins months earlier with a relationship unraveling and a child being drawn into something she could not fully understand. The connection began not with Shanda, but with Melinda Loveless. In 1990, Melinda, then 15 years old, began dating a girl by the name of Amanda Heverin, who was just 13. Even at that stage, the relationship was marked by chaos. This relationship started at a time when Melinda's home life was unraveling, and as we mentioned, Larry, her abusive father, had completely abandoned the family and her mother had remarried. From this point onwards, Melinda's behaviour grew increasingly erratic. She was involved in multiple fights at school, reported feelings of depression, and began receiving professional counselling. In March of 1991, Melinda came out to her mother as a lesbian, something that her 2 older sisters had already done. An admission that was initially met with fury before being reluctantly accepted. As the year went on, Melinda and Amanda's relationship began to fracture. Arguments became more frequent, trust eroded, and it was during this period that Amanda was introduced to Shanda Sharer.
Shanda was 12 years old. Amanda and Shanda crossed paths early in the fall semester at Hazelwood Middle School under unusual circumstances. Amanda actually started a fight with Shanda that landed both of them in detention. But what began as tension softened into conversation, and conversation eventually formed a connection. They became friends. Soon, they were exchanging notes and love letters, their bond deepening in a way that felt intense and meaningful to 2 girls navigating early adolescence. To Melinda Loveless, that closeness was simply intolerable. The age gap matters here. Shanda was not just younger, she was at a completely different developmental stage. She did not have the emotional footing or the life experience to recognise when attention became fixation, or when jealousy curdled into something far more dangerous. In early October of 1991, Amanda proudly took Shanda as her date to a school dance. Melinda was there. She immediately confronted Shanda directly. It was not subtle, it was not friendly, and it marked the moment when Shanda shifted from being a simple presence to being perceived as a rival. Although Amanda and Melinda never formally ended their relationship, Melinda soon began seeing someone else, an older girl, while continuing to fixate on Shanda. After Amanda and Shanda attended a local festival together later that month, Melinda's jealousy escalated to an entirely new level and into open hostility. She began talking openly about killing Shanda. She threatened her publicly. Letters were written, some of them containing explicit death threats. Shanda's mother noticed the tension. Concerned by the intensity by the situation and its emotional impact on her daughter, she made a decision they believed would protect her. In late November, they arranged for Shanda to be transferred to a Catholic school. What they could not know was that the damage had already been done. Amanda, Shanda's new girlfriend, would later say that she tried to intervene, that she took the threatening letters Melinda had sent her to a local youth prosecutor, but nothing came of it. No action was taken, no warning was issued, and no one stepped in to interrupt what was already rapidly and very publicly spiralling out of control. What connected all of these girls was not just proximity, but shared vulnerability. Each of them was grappling with identity, belonging, and complicated feelings about sexuality in environments that offered little guidance or safety at the time. But with all these negative feelings, Shanda responded with trust. She believed problems could be talked through. She believed misunderstandings could be resolved. And during the early hours of January 11th, she believed that agreeing to meet up with and talk to Melinda was the right thing to do. That very belief is how she ended up in the car, trusting the 4 killers she was now surrounded by. And it is here we move on to the timeline of the murder of Shanda Sharer, burned alive by her friends.
Friday, January 10th, 1992, late night. In the hours before Shanda ever stepped into the car, the plan was already unfolding. 2 of the girls had never even met Melinda Loveless before that night, and believed they were simply heading out to a punk rock gig together. Another aimless stretch of teenage freedom. They did not understand that something far darker was already in motion.
Through the mutuality of Melinda and Laurie had invited along Hope and Tony. They were all going to go to this gig, and apparently at this gig, Tony and Hope met 2 boys, went back to their car and had sex with them, and during some period of time in that process, they told these 2 boys that they were on their way to kill a young girl, though this has been put forward as pure speculation.
At first, what was shared was framed as nothing more than intimidation. Melinda made it clear that the knife she carried was only meant to scare Shanda, to frighten her, and to put her in her place. She spoke openly about her anger, describing Shanda as a copycat, someone who'd taken what she believed belonged to her girlfriend. It was presented as jealousy, humiliation and revenge, but not yet as murder. The plan relied on deception rather than force. When they eventually reached Shanda's house, Melinda stayed hidden in the car while instructions were given. Knock on the door, introduce yourselves as friends of Amanda Heverin, and ask Shanda to come along. Tell her Amanda was waiting. Tell her they were going somewhere familiar, somewhere local. A place spoken about like a dare rather than a destination. A spot known as the Witch's Castle. The story was simple, believable, and carefully chosen. Shanda hesitated at first. She had never met one of these girls before, so she did not rush. She suggested they come back later, and for a brief moment, the night could still have ended there. But the decision to return hours later, to continue with the plan, was made, and by the time the car pulled up again after midnight, Melinda was concealed beneath a blanket in the back seat, the knife within reach. And the light at the door was about to draw a 12-year-old girl into a situation she had never agreed to, and could never control.
So yeah, I mean, at this point, Melinda has made numerous public and written threats to Shanda about her involvement with Amanda. They knew if they said that Melinda would be there, that would probably make Shanda less likely to leave the house. So instead they've said, oh, Amanda's waiting for you at the Witch's Castle. At the same time, Shanda was open to trying to, as we've talked about in her background, she didn't like conflict. She wanted to smooth things over with everyone. She never liked, open hostility. So Shanda still wanted to kind of make things right with Melinda. And the first time they've knocked at the door, she's a little suspicious, but also she was staying at her father's house. Her father was still awake, so she didn't want to leave while her dad was present. She said, come back in a few hours and then he'll be asleep and I can leave. And it's this decision. They basically lured her to say, look, Amanda wants to meet you at the Witch's Castle, which was not unusual at this point. And she has no idea what's waiting for her in the car.
midnight, January 11th, 1992. As her father and stepmother were already fast asleep upstairs, Shanda explained that she needed to go quietly and get some extra clothes before she reluctantly left the house. She quickly did so and then returned to the doorstep before closing the door of her father's home for the final time. Together with Laurie and Hope, she then made her way towards the parked car. She had no idea what was truly waiting for her at the Witch's Castle. She then entered the car, seeing Tony, also present in the vehicle. She did not know any of these 3 girls, and she only entered because she was under the belief that she was going to be taken to her girlfriend, who needed her and desperately wanted to see her. As Shanda slid into the car, the atmosphere felt ordinary, almost mundane, until it wasn't. Hope's questions about her relationship with Amanda started casually, probing, but there was an edge to them, a curiosity that didn't feel innocent. Then, without warning, Melinda erupted from the back seat, pressing a knife to Shanda's throat. Her words were a whisper and a threat all at once, demanding answers Shanda could have never been ready to give. In that instant, the ordinary night twisted into something she could never escape. The group then spoke of Witch's Castle, the location they were heading to 8 miles away alongside the Ohio River. At the Witch's Castle, they dragged Shanda, who was crying uncontrollably, inside and tied her arms and legs with rope, their rough strands biting into her skin. Melinda then started circling her, taunting her with quiet cruelty, commenting on how her pretty long hair was and wondering how it might look once it was all gone. Words that made Shanda tremble even more. One by one, Melinda began slipping Shanda's rings from her fingers, handing them to others as though they were trophies. At some point, Hope snatched Shanda's Mickey Mouse wristwatch from her and started dancing along to the tune it played, the cheerful melody grotesque against the fear in the strange, dark building. Laurie leaned in close, her voice low and threatening, claiming the Witch's Castle was already full of human remains, and that Shanda's could be next. Then, to push the terror even further, Laurie grabbed a shirt with a smiley face from the car and set it alight, only to pull back in panic when she thought passing cars might see. Still, the girls left the Witch's Castle with Shanda in tow, forcing her back into the car, her fear swelling with every step into the night. But the night was far from over, and Shanda would be held captive for a total of 8 hours.
Yeah, so this is pure horror at this point, and for the visual folks, we've popped up a few images of Witch's Castle, which at daytime looks pretty terrifying. In the middle of the night, with this all going on, is just absolutely terrifying. To remind you all, Shanda is 12. The rest of them are teenagers. There's a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old, and two 15-year-olds. I mean, the fact that she was wearing kind of a Mickey Mouse watch and had a smiley face t-shirt really brings that to life. And it's a scary drive as well at night. This is back in 1992, long before sat-navs, anything like that. So they had to, stop repeatedly to ask for directions at different points. And this drive along the Ohio River at night, there's woods either side of it, river, and then you arrive at this Witch's Castle building, which is in the woods itself, stone building. There's no way that Shanda could even understand what was happening to her or why it was happening. So during the second drive, obviously they've already bound Shanda at this point and they've threatened her. Shanda began to beg her captors to turn back, her voice minuscule against the hum of the engine. During the panic, the group got lost more than once, stopping at a petrol station and covering a bound Shanda with a blanket, mere steps away from anyone who might have noticed. A couple of strangers walked by, and a few boys that they'd met at the gig, all oblivious. There were no phones to record and there was no GPS to guide them, just the darkness and the girls' careful insistence that nothing was amiss. Hours later, they finally reached the edge of a wooded area near Laurie's home in Madison. Still alone, still unseen, and still in control. Laurie then led Shanda down a logging road into dense woods to a dark, abandoned building hidden from view. Tony and Hope stayed behind in the car, their unease growing with every step Laurie took into the shadows. Melinda followed them closely, a knife clutched in her hands. Melinda and Laurie then forced a now shivering Shanda to strip to her underwear, and the violence escalated quickly. Melinda struck her repeatedly in the face with her fists, turning fear into chaos. Laurie then began forcing Shanda's face into her knee, badly cutting her mouth on her braces in the process. After a few minutes, Melinda began trying to cut Shanda's throat, but the knife was too blunt. Hope was then summoned from the parked vehicle in order to hold Shanda down. Repeated blows to the head, stabbings to the stomach, and strangling with rope caused Shanda to fall unconscious. Her small body was then picked up and crumpled into the boot of the car. Tony and Hope were told in chilling certainty that 12-year-old Shanda was now dead. The group then drove to Laurie's house in order to clean themselves and drink a can of Coke, but they heard screaming coming from the rear of the car. So Laurie went to the car and stabbed Shanda several times with a sharpened kitchen knife. The group then gathered inside the house, convinced that Shanda was now deceased, where Laurie then made the decision to try and calm the group down by offering to, quote, tell their futures for them with rune stones. By 2:30 a.m., Tony and Hope remained at the house while Laurie and Melinda drove off, taking a grim detour into the quiet country roads towards Canaan, potentially looking for a location to try and hide the body. Suddenly, from the trunk of the vehicle, Shanda's cries and gurgles reached them, a small, desperate sound that made them stop the vehicle. When they opened it, Shanda was there, sitting up, covered in blood, her eyes rolled back, barely able to make a sound, a terrifying reminder that what had begun in the car was still, somehow, far from over. They were children. They had multiple chances to walk away, and yet they chose not to. Infuriated, and perhaps even a little bit terrified by this, Laurie retrieved a tire iron from the car. She then proceeded to repeatedly bludgeon Shanda with it, bragging to Melinda that she, quote, felt her skull cave in. And this was obviously during the attack. She then stopped and asked Melinda to, quote, smell the brain and smell the wounds.
That is fucking crazy.
Yeah. Again, kind of mentioned it a few times, but all four individuals had dozens of chances to stop this. And it was not quick, compassionate in any sense.
The only thing I'd say, though, on that is the fact that I do think they went out there with the intention of it being threatening and saying stay away from her and all that, and then it just escalated. And I think the girls not knowing, even Melinda in the car, two of the girls don't know her from anyone. That's the first time they met her that night, and this has all kind of happened. I'm not at all dismissing it and things like that, but I also think you've got people in the car smashing people's heads in with tire irons. It's probably it's acting out. You don't know what's going to happen to you, and I'm not saying that that's the way to feel it. But if you're a teenager in the car that will go on in front of you, it would be a terrifying situation to be in as well.
This is drawn out, isn't it? It's not like it's a single intense, just quick murder. It's these moments, like you said, Ben. There are at least 2 or 3 moments in this particular night where things could have stopped or been intervened or something. And it is fascinating to look at the group and see what the dynamic is there and why people didn't want to intervene. Were they scared, or were they just going along with it? Is it just the insane peer pressure? It's really interesting to figure out what's going on here.
Yeah, I think the people remaining in the car as well is kind of their silent protest to not being involved in these things or knowing it's gone too far and things like that. But obviously that isn't. Well, it's not the time when they had mobile phones and things like that. Be able to make the call. They're in the middle of nowhere with these two girls who are actively stabbing and attempting to kill someone in front of them. But I completely agree. I'm not making any excuses.
You've got a point. It's like what else do you do in that situation when you're out on the sticks or out alone, and the main, let's say the spearhead of the group has got is weaponized. Like, what do you do in that situation? If you are so scared, you stay quiet. You may go along with it, but it's still shocking.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm not. And again, I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit here. I'm just saying, like, obviously there is moments where you'd like to think they'd intervene or they'd stand up and say, it needs to stop, and they haven't done that. So, but yeah, it's a difficult situation to imagine yourself in.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, Laurie and Melinda seem to be the ringleaders here. Laurie very much a follower of Melinda, but I mean, in this instance here, Laurie's the one that's kind of the key aggressor, I suppose. But when they were at the witch's castle, all 4 of them were taunting, all 4 of them were binding her, all 4 of them were threatening her, and all 4 of them played a part.
Mm-hmm.
That was still a point where, wasn't it, where it was still at the stage where that still was probably, you could argue that's part of the original plan, was to send a message, and then it went from there
just to scare. Yeah.
to the next level of actual physical horror.
It's that choice, isn't it, to burn the smiley face t-shirt. They've then thought, oh God, if a passerby sees a fire coming from the woods, they're going to stop. Let's get in the car. Let's do something else. And that's when the something else is this.
Yeah.
So after the attack, the noises then fell completely silent. They then despicably decided to sexually assault Shanda with the very same tire iron. The pair would drive a few miles and then park up and repeat the same barbaric process again and again over the course of the next hour. Just before sunrise, covered in blood, Melinda and Laurie returned to Laurie's house in order to clean up, waking up Tony and Hope, who somehow managed to doze off soundly. Hope asked about Shanda, and Laurie laughed as she vividly explained what had happened. The laughter got so loud that it woke Laurie's mother up, who at first scolded her daughter for being out so late, but then almost casually offered to make breakfast for the group. Laurie declined, saying she needed to drive the others home. The ordinary morning routine somehow brushing up against the extraordinary darkness of the night that had just unfolded. Shanda's badly injured body slowly letting go of life inside the rear of the vehicle parked just yards away. The girls then left their house and headed to a petrol station near their high school. Here they filled the car and brought a 2-litre bottle of Pepsi. Laurie then poured out the Pepsi and refilled the bottle with petrol. They then drove north to a familiar stretch of gravel road. Hope then opened the boot of the car, where she heinously stated, "You're not looking so hot now, are you?" before spraying Shanda's entire body with Windex.
The fuck, man.
The group then made their final plans. Tony refused to leave the car while Laurie and Hope wrapped Shanda, still alive, in a blanket and carried her into a nearby field. Hope then poured petrol all over her, and together the group set her on fire. Melinda, unconvinced that Shanda had died, returned a few minutes later to pour the remaining petrol, ensuring Shanda would definitely not survive. During the final stages of her life, Shanda reportedly could only whisper the word, "Mummy."
Yeah, truly heartbreaking scene, and also just highlighting how young she was there, 12 years old, and this happening to her. I think, yeah, that's what the moment I meant, when kind of a quiet protest from Tony not leaving the car at that moment. But yeah, horrible. And obviously, yeah, Hope getting more involved with that stage of it there and taunting her at that point, and the pure disregard for a human life, a young human life that, you know, had done nothing wrong but except for trust people that she didn't know and believe them and feel there's a pure intention for what they were saying that was going to happen that evening. Yeah, a really, really difficult one to digest.
By 9:30 a.m, satisfied it was over, the group headed to a nearby McDonald's for breakfast, joking about Shanda's burned body as if it was nothing more than the sausages on their plates.
But yeah, I mean, that in itself is a huge point, because the fact that they can all happily go and have breakfast after what they've done and joke about what they've done, laugh and joke. I mean, none of us were there, none of us know what all of them were saying, but 4 of them happily having breakfast and comfortably moving on with their lives after all of this is why I have no sympathy for any member of that group.
No. So after leaving McDonald's, the girls then made a pact to never again mention the night's events, and they thought they had gotten away with the murder. Just minutes after it happened, however, Tony called a friend to recount the murder, while Laurie dropped her and Hope off at their homes before returning to the area with Melinda. Melinda then made the decision to tell Amanda, Shanda's girlfriend and her ex, that Shanda was dead, and even arranged to pick her up later. Soon, the 3 girls recounted the events of the night, driving afterward to fetch Amanda and bring her over to Melinda's house. At first, Amanda could hardly believe the story, until Laurie opened the trunk, revealing Shanda's bloody handprints and socks still inside the vehicle. Amanda, horrified, asked to be taken home. Outside her house, Melinda kissed her passionately, whispering that she loved her and pressed her not to tell anyone. Amanda promised she would keep the secret before stepping inside. Later that morning, 2 hunters driving towards Jefferson Proving Ground noticed what they thought was a mannequin on the roadside, only to realise that it was, in fact, the charred body of a child. The police were immediately called, and State Trooper David Cam, Sheriff Buck Shipley, and detectives began an investigation, noting immediately the deliberate nature of the crime, the extent of the burns, and the deliberate attempt to destroy her identity. The face and hands burned beyond recognition, and the arms and fists clenched from the agonising heat. Meanwhile, Shanda's father, Stephen, realised that she was missing, contacted friends and neighbours, and eventually filed a missing person report together with her mother. By later that same evening, Tony, unable to handle the mental realisation of what had happened, confided in her parents and later to the police, giving a rambling statement that named Shanda and the others involved. Detectives confirmed the body through dental records. Melinda and Laurie were also arrested, with the bulk of the evidence coming from the testimony of Tony and Hope. From that moment, prosecutors declared their intent to try the 2 older girls as adults, and for months, details of the case remained tightly controlled, leaving the story in the hands of those closest to the crime. All 4 girls were charged as adults and ultimately accepted plea bargains to avoid the death penalty. Laurie Tackett and Melinda Loveless were each sentenced to 60 years, with Laurie released in January 2018 after nearly 26 years plus a year of supervised release, and Melinda released in September 2019 after more than 26 years, serving post-release supervision in Jefferson County, Kentucky. 26 years?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Hope Rippey was sentenced to 60 years, later reduced to 35 years on appeal, and was released after serving 14 years. Tony Lawrence, in exchange for her cooperation, pled guilty to criminal confinement, received a maximum 20-year sentence, and was released after 9 years, remaining under supervision until 2002. Shanda's father, Stephen Sharer, never recovered from the loss, drinking heavily until his death in 2005, at age 53. In interviews, Jackie Vaught described him as having done everything he could to kill himself, besides put a gun to his head, ultimately succumbing to what she called a death from a broken heart.
So whilst obviously the murderers of her daughter are in prison, Jackie would go on to say she'd never forgive Melinda. There was nothing behind her eyes. She was a numb human being, and yeah, she basically said, like, there's no way I could ever forgive her. But as time went by, whilst Melinda was in prison, I think Jackie saw an interview with her, and Melinda has started working with the Indiana Canine Assistance Network, ICANN, which is a prison-based service dog program. Basically, they train dogs up to help work with people with disabilities, and Melinda spoke quite passionately about it and spoke about her remorse and things like that, and her regret for everything that had happened. And quite unbelievably, Jackie actually would go on to donate a dog named Angel to the cause for Melinda to train, which, yeah, in 2012 she did that, and then obviously Melinda learned of that and was very touched and very emotional about that. The gesture drew attention because a lot of people couldn't believe that she had forgiven her. But I think you can't begrudge anyone for forgiving people, and obviously that's how people move on. But also people have the right to hold people accountable for the rest of their lives. They have the right never to forgive, but she saw it right at this moment to forgive. And it's not just the one dog. She would look to kind of donate a dog every year to this cause in memory of her daughter, which I thought was quite touching. And again, hopefully no one ever gets to go through anything like that, but a moving moment from her mum.
Definitely. I remember one of the first things I saw when because I don't know if this would necessarily have been a case that even came onto our radar without doing this darkest series ever. But some of the first things I saw were Shanda's mother and one of her sisters on the Dr. Phil show, and they kind of introduced it as Face to Face with My Daughter's Killer. And if you've got the time to watch it, there are quite a lot of the clips are available on YouTube. We'll obviously pop everything into our Facebook group, but they couldn't look. I believe it was Hope and Tony that were appearing on the show, but I believe there is also another episode with Laurie and Melinda, and they couldn't look her in the eye. And it's just so bad, because when we talk about these cases we've done, this darkest series ever, it's not only revisiting the case to tell the story and explain what these people went through, but can you imagine being a family member or a loved one of this person who then finds out in detail about what their 12-year-old daughter or friend or loved one went through? I mean, imagine being Amanda after this. It's only by chance that her and Shanda formed a relationship, a friendship, a connection, that this entire thing happened. It's completely harrowing. And as we said at the start of the episode, there are some similarities with a more modern case, which is the murder of Skylar Neese. The motives, slightly different motives, but there was a kind of a friendship triangle where two of the friends became intimate with one another, and there was lots of jealousy and aggression towards one person. But the end result and even the murder location was very similar in the Skylar Neese case. But I've got Google Maps, as I always do, to get you to the final location, as well as the witch's castle, which will pop up on screen. But yeah, just this case has been very heavy. I feel like it's broken us, which is a theme. This series.
Definitely, yeah. No, very, very, very sad case, and yeah, very unfitting in the series theme of the darkest cases, darkest series ever done. But yes, guys, I think it's probably we are definitely due a decompression session after that one. Definitely needed. Rather than a question, a bit of a pep talk, I think is what we need. Kind of keep us motivated, keep us on the prize, and yeah.
Okay, boys. I'm very excited about this, Tom, because I can see a cheeky little thumbnail already. So, what a choice.
Tom, Ben, Dan. Now, I've heard great things about your true crime podcast called I Could Murder a Podcast. And I know it's going really well, and you're going to take it to the next level, lads. Keep dreaming, keep believing, and keep pushing, because you guys are the best. Bash! I Could Murder a Podcast. Bash! Have it large, lads. Keep going.
Bash!
E-bash. Yeah, for maybe this is our 8th episode of the series. A little pep talk, a little keep going, bit of motivation from Big John. What else can you ask for?
That is absolutely fantastic.
And by the way, a big shout out to Big John, because he got that over to me within half an hour of the request.
Speedy.
And
wow,
Speedy
and
John.
I was more than happy with the delivery. Yeah, Speedy Big John. So thank you, Big John, for that, and yes, giving me the strength to carry on.
Thank you, Big John. Hope you're well.
Fantastic.
Big fan.
So we'll start with this one, which was posted in our Facebook group, which is, if you're not a member of, please come over. It's I Could Murder a Podcast listeners and true crime discussions group. This was actually posted last month by Tara Newman. And when I first saw it, I thought, this is kind of over and done with. But it ended up getting 57 comments.
Oh, damn.
Quite an interesting one. So big thank you to Tara for this. And Tara goes on to say, Dear Agony Ickmap Aunts, or as Tom referred to us, the Agony Uncles, please can you help settle a debate that has plagued my relationship for the past 7 years? How do you pronounce the name of this medicine? And attached is a photo of Galpharm ibuprofen caplets. Now, she goes on to say, my partner pronounces it in a way that is weird to myself, but he was happily validated when we were in North Wales at New Year's, when a shopkeeper was the only other person I have ever met pronounced it the same way as him. Please, aunties, how do you pronounce it? Is it ibuprofen or ibuprofen? Ibuprofen.
Neither, unfortunately.
Ibuprofen. So the two options we've been given are ibuprofen or ibuprofen.
There's no R, surely?
I would go ibuprofen, which I think is why there are 57 comments. Ibuprofen, the painkiller.
I think the correct way is ibuprofen, but I do I'm a bit biased in myself because when I ever have one of these tablets, I always say ibuprofen just for jokes to myself. Ibuprofen.
Nice joke.
But, it's just me in joke with myself.
Not the best guy for pronunciations, but the two options are ibuprofen, or ibuprofen. Ibuprofen.
Not brew. It's not ibrew, is it?
It's
No, it's an ibu. It's an ibuprofen.
Yeah, no wonder that's kicked off.
Ibuprofen. Let us know, guys.
The top comment has 37 likes from Lauren Sargent. Not sure where either of those options have come from. It's ibuprofen. And then there are people saying, they're saying ibuprofen. No idea where you're getting the R in the brew. I mean, we're not anyone to educate people on how things are pronounced, but there's a lot of reaction, some anonymous reaction as well. You can give yourself nicknames in the group. That's fun.
Ibuprofen.
And one quick other one, guys. So if you do want to get involved, you can send us an email or a video, a voice note over to us at hello@icmap.co.uk with Decompression Session as the topic. Or you can pop it in our group like Tara Newman has done and just, make sure you tag us in it and make it clear it's for the Decompression Session. But Andrea Kessler has got in touch. She says, hello guys, I had to move last month and listen to ICMAP during packing, cleaning, unpacking, more cleaning and putting together furniture and so on. Thank you for keeping me company and thank you for an amazing podcast. You're very welcome. Absolute pleasure to be with you on that journey there. A question for your decompression session. If you could have any kind of animal as a pet, what animal would it be? The animal would not harm you or anyone. It would be tame and nice to you. It would not be dangerous. Also, make sure not to apply any logic. In this fantasy, you have no space limitations, and if you want to hang out with a blue whale, just imagine that is possible. Would love to hear your thoughts. So no limitations. What animal you want to have as your pet?
Oh, it's hard to top a dog, but I need to be more creative, don't I? I don't know, something that flies. Can they be mythical? Pet dragon?
I mean, it's not no logic, but I mean, I guess you could go dragon.
What would be a
perhaps?
good money-making tamed animal?
Oh,
that's a horrible way to
always make money out of your animals.
No, I think that was for other
love them
people.
for what they are.
Yeah.
Fucking hell.
Yeah. Search and rescue
shark.
Dan?
I would either go with a big fat lion, or I would go for an octopus actually because they're my favourite. Most favourite creatures on Earth, but I suppose that would mean I'd have to live under the sea.
No, you can have a big old tank which they're very happy to live in, a part of your house.
Fine, I'll take that one then, please. Thank you, Tom.
Sure thing, man. Octopus, that's too fair. That's great. That's great.
And you, Tom?
Well, even you saying there, Ben, I think you said shark, but a shark gets really bad press.
They do.
So having a shark that was lovely would be nice as a PR thing because I think sharks all over the world, demonised when they shouldn't be. But I also like the idea of having a bit of a hug. So a big old bear would be lovely.
Oh yeah, big old grizzly, cuddly bear.
Yeah, grizzly, cuddly bear who's just chilling out, lovely, friendly. Good to give a good old hug to a bear.
I saw online recently someone saving a great white shark's life that had been beached, and it was actually very emotional because you're right, sharks do get a bad rep, and they saved the life and got him back in the sea.
Oh.
Yeah, you've both come up with some nice answers. Maybe something that could fly but could also carry me. But the only thing I can think of that could carry me is like a dragon.
Transport.
A plane. A Boeing 947.
I've always quite liked ducks, but to have a duck as a pet, you could do that now anyway.
That really sums it up.
That's good. Take that one, mate.
Yeah, I'll stick with sharks. So we've got a bear, a lion, an octopus, and a shark. Yeah.
You go play with the ducks, mate.
Yeah.
Or like a gorilla that could help me do like landscape
Don't try and make
gardening.
it cool now. You said that.
Okay. Do landscape gardening. What?
Yeah.
He has to make them work or make money from them. That's his limitations, isn't it? What can I make money from this?
Thanks for that question, Andrea. That was awesome.
Legend.
Yeah, it's a good one. I like those ones that get us thinking. And I do we do get very logical, or I do with these questions. So it's good to have those logics pushed to one side. If you do want to get involved, guys, head over to icmap.co.uk with an email. And we'd love to answer your questions. But Ben, also for next week, have you got a little cryptic clue?
Oh, it's coming to me.
Benjamin Carter's Cryptic Clues.
Yes, indeedy. Next episode, a case that has been requested a ton over the years. Those terrible tradies. Should be very gettable.
I've actually had a tradie having 2 excuses for not doing some work recently, so I've experienced it. I've got a cough because I went out on Friday. Don't tell me that. And then next day, doctor says my elbow's bad, so I'm going to be off for 2 weeks. Which one is it? Give me one excuse and stand by it. Don't give me 2 excuses in 2 days. So we've gone with someone else.
Yeah.
Fair, man.
Yeah, man.
Yep.
There you go. Anyway, enough about that. But yes, thank you so much for joining us, guys. Much appreciated. And also, by the way, I'm going to do it, guys. What fuels us on this podcast is our bloody lovely sponsor, is Holy. And if you guys are not getting involved, then please do. I genuinely use Holy before I go to the gym now to give me a good old pep before I go. Or if I'm feeling a little bit like maybe I've had a bit of an evening on it, I'll get the hydration drink as well. Got a delicious blue raspberry one. Some of that just makes me feel right as rain very soon after. So why not head over to Holy and use our code IGMAT for 10% off, or use IGMAT5 for £5 off your first order. You will not regret it. It's actually an energy drink that's not full of shit. It's got some vitamins in there. It's going to make you feel great. Why not get them?
There seems to be a lot of love for Holy as well. So thanks for everybody who's been supporting us, and we're genuinely getting awesome feedback from it. So keep doing what you're doing.
Definitely. And on that note, like we always say...
Whoopsie.
That's all right, boy. You should know your role. Keep doing what you're doing.
Well, unless it's monetizing animals.
Yeah, please.
Don't ever monetize animals.
Don't be Larry Loveless. Ever.
Don't say keep doing what you're doing unless it's you're told Ben. Or a fan. Just not me. Not me.
No.
Anyway, neglect your relationship with hydration.
Yeah. All right, Ben. You go find a pond and go find a duck and go, I wish you were my friend. But until next time, take care of yourself, guys. See you later. Toodle-pip.
I wish you were my friend. Even the ducks rejected him. See ya.
Don't give him bread.